If the information exists but is not discoverable, it doesn't exist. And if the information exists but is not accessible, then it's broken.
Just to talk about accessibility in documentation, right? It's always overlooked.
Yeah, I paused because there's just so much. There's so much to think about. Cut your filler words out, things like obviously and just or simply. Those are, just extra.
Nice. I can't ask for more because I said one word. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think courteous is one of the ones that it comes in at the last, but I think it should kind of go in the first because.
Welcome to the Knowledge Base Ninjas podcast, where Gauri Ramkumar of Document 360 finds the best SaaS self-service knowledge bases in the world and then interviews their creators. Let's get started with today's episode.
Welcome everyone to the Knowledge Base Ninjas podcast. Our guest today is Stacy Reed, Senior Technical Writer at Wavelo. Hi Stacy, how are you doing today?
Hi Gauri, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Welcome to the podcast. And before we start anything on the topic, please help us to understand a little bit more about yourself. How did you get into this profession and how are you enjoying so far?
Okay. Yeah. So I started at Two Cows 25 years ago. I was hired in as a software reviewer and I worked my way through help desk and content production and then content editing, content management and SEO. And then my boss, Izzy, took a chance on me and hired me to do some technical writing for the Two Cows Wavelo division when it first started. So that was about 4 years ago.
Wow, that's a lot of experience to talk about. Let's see how much we can cover in the upcoming 20-25 minutes.
Okay.
Right. Just to talk about accessibility in documentation, right? It's always overlooked. Now, from your perspective, why is accessibility in technical writing so important?
Well, I would say that accessibility is important because it's the work. We can't forget that accessibility has to be done. We have to say that this is something that is actually part of the job, and we cannot say that the job is finished until it's done. And it's so important because we need to make sure that everyone has accessibility to the documentation that you're writing. And that goes from, someone who might have a disability to someone who is neurologically different, someone who is neurodivergent. So we want to make sure that, all of our documentation is clear. And I think that accessibility is what helps make it clear. I think, to paraphrase Write the Docs, they once said that from a user's perspective, if a feature is not documented, then it doesn't exist. If a feature is documented incorrectly, then it's broken. And I would like to I'd like to turn that around and talk about accessibility for just a moment and say that a similar phrase would be, from a user's perspective, if the information exists but is not discoverable, it doesn't exist. And if the information exists but is not accessible, then it's broken.
Very well said, Stacy. You did speak about documentation being accessible to everybody. Now, what are some of the common barriers people face, particularly with disabilities, when it comes to consuming technical documentation?
Well, I'd say that some of the barriers would be, I think they would probably be a little obvious from the get-go. You would think that, people who have sighted issues, people who need to have their documentation presented in a different format, something that might be a little bit more readable, something that is easy to understand. And, some people might need to rely on using a screen reader, or they might need to be able to navigate the website using only their keyboard. So these are some of the things that we need to keep in mind.
True. Now, how can you make sure that technical writers ensure that content is inclusive and easy to navigate for a diverse audience?
Well,
what are the principles that someone should follow when creating technical documentation?
Yeah, I paused because there's just so much. There's so much to think about. So first of all, I'd say it's vital to use clear and simple language. Wavelo has helped Dish launch a nationwide mobile network from the ground up. and we've supported millions of Boost mobile customers with their billing and provisioning and catalog services. And in that millions of people, how many of those people are going to have accessibility issues? How many of those people are not going to be able to understand how to use your product because they can't even discover it or they can't access it in some way? And so I'd say that at first you should probably think about, making sure that you're using clear, simple language. You're avoiding the jargon and technical terms unless they're absolutely necessary. And when they are, define them clearly. Cut your filler words out, things like obviously and just or simply. Those are, just extra. And it takes, extra brain and reading power just to kind of filter out those words because they're meaningless. So I would say that you should probably keep your sentences short, focus on one idea at a time. There are so many different accessibility guidelines out there and rules. I would, repeat your key ideas, reinforce them, skip your metaphors and sarcasm and stuff like that. It's just not needed in technical documentation. And make sure that you're doing things like, left aligning your text and making sure you have clear headings and subheadings. Make sure that you're, doing that one idea per line concept. So yeah, there's a lot of things. It's not just alt text for your images, the visuals should be clear and meaningful and well labeled, that kind of stuff.
Nice. Just coming on to our rapid fire round questions. It looks like you read quite a lot of contents. Would you be able to share some of the useful documentation related resources you recently came across?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I'm super thrilled when I can find a new resource that I've never been to before and I can kind of just pour into it. I think I've seen every one of the Pronovics podcasts with Christoph Fantoma. I've watched so many of the API, the Docs, and AI, the Docs webinars, and I enjoy the Write the Docs community. I'd rather be writing, hugging face, like inspiration is everywhere.
All right. Now, one word that comes to your mind when you hear documentation.
Empowerment.
Nice. I can't ask for more because I said one word. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, a piece of advice you would give to your 20-year-old self.
I think I tell myself that clarity means meeting people where they are and removing barriers and making sure that the information works for as many people as possible. I think I heard one time, it was Brene Brown, who's an author and lecturer. She said that she and her team had learned some really important life lessons. It changed everything from the way they talk with each other to the way they negotiated with their partners. And it was just a transformative statement. And that is, clear is kind and unclear is unkind. So okay. I like to think about that often when I'm writing technical documentation. And I think I would tell that to my younger self as well. Like, make sure that you're being clear.
Nice. All right. Now, we spoke a lot about accessibility as part of this podcast series, Stacy. So is there anything else you would like to add to our audiences today?
I think everyone's heard of the 7 C's, to be clear, coherent, concise, concrete, correct, complete, and courteous. And I think courteous is one of the ones that it comes in at the last, but I think it should kind of go in the first because it goes back to that being kind with your clarity, that courteous nature, the desire to want to help. I think that's what got me into technical writing in the first place.
All right. Super. So with that, we are at the end of this podcast episode, Stacy, and all the very best for your projects. And anything else you want to add? Otherwise, we are good to close the conversation.
The time just flew by. It seems like we just started talking, but it was really nice to meet you. And this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Knowledge Base Ninjas podcast. Please head to iTunes, rate, and provide honest feedback on the podcast. See you next week.